It has been a great morning so far. I don't know if y'all think that or not, but I really do. The only thing that would make it even remotely better was if there was about 30 more people on this side of the room. Because right now we're kind of lopsided. This is true. We're not in a boat. If we were in a boat, we'd be sinking for sure. Seriously, thank you guys for being here. We're wrapping up our day-by-day series that we've been going through. I actually toyed around with ending it last week, but there was one more part to this whole thing that I just really felt like needed to be kind of discussed and kind of fleshed out a little bit. If you're new with us, maybe you're watching for the first time this week and you're like, man, you're ending out something. I missed a whole bunch of stuff. Let me just kind of get you caught up real quick. Or even if you're in the room and this is the first week you've been with us. This whole series came around from this idea that Christianity in today's culture has become a very watered down version of what it was originally intended to be. It's not at all. I would say probably 90% not what Jesus intended for it to be. Because the whole thing started with one singular revelation from Jesus when he was talking to his disciples. And in Matthew chapter 16, verse 24, Jesus is talking. He says, he told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, then let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. We said this in the very first week, and I've said it every week. Your translation may say something a little bit different. It may have the word daily added in there, which is really kind of the thought process behind this, because in order to truly call yourself a Christian, we have to understand that it's a daily realigning that we have to do. Christianity is something that you do. It's not just something that sits on a shelf somewhere and you look at it and you say, this is my name tag, I am a Christian. It is actually something you do. And we walked away from the first part by saying that following actually happens when you move, when you go from point A to point B, however many steps it takes you to get there. Otherwise, you're not truly following anybody. And then in part two, we talked about this idea that there's a depth to Christianity that we tend to push back against because it takes us outside of our comfort zones. But it's something that Jesus leaned into so heavily because it was the calling card of what Christianity would look like. It was our Christian driver's license, if you will. And we walked away by saying that loving others is actually evidence of following Jesus. Because in order to love people the way Jesus did, we have to actually be following him so that we can learn from him to see what it is. And then in week 3, we talked about this idea that our culture has kind of asked the wrong question about fatherhood and manliness. And we asked the question in our culture of what makes a good father. And in the Christian realm, in the church world, it should actually be what makes someone a godly man or a godly father, because Jesus calls the men to set the temperature in the home spiritually. It's not the wife's job, it's not the mother's job, it is the father's job, it is the man's job, the husband, to set the spiritual temperature in the home. It's our responsibility to lead our households. And then last week, we talked about this idea that Jesus' teachings were a major plot twist to everything that the Jewish world understood about God. It kind of took everything and spun it up on its head, especially during the Sermon on the Mount. Because in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus actually used the words, you've heard this, but I'm saying this. You've heard it said that this is how it should be, but I'm telling you it should be this way. And it all boiled down to one simple fact, one simple thought process, that when it comes to dealing with people in our everyday life, that we're actually called to respond and not to react to the people that are there. One of my favorite things in the world, and this is where I kind of get myself in trouble sometimes, because I like to people watch. And honestly, one of the best places to go people watching is at a concert. Because when you go to a concert, you see all kinds of people. One of our favorite bands to go see live is a band called Skillet. If you've never heard of Skillet, it's okay. Skillet is a very hard rock Christian band, and they were one of the true, like, really hard rock Christian bands to cross over also into the secular world. Even though they were Christians, the music that they write leans into a whole lot of things that everybody deals with, everything from addiction issues to mental health issues, and it's evident when you go to one of their concerts. John Cooper, their lead singer, is very vocal. He's very outspoken about what he believes, but you can look around the audience and you can tell there's a very broad group of people. And like you can look at some people and go, I bet they don't go to church. I bet if they go to church, they don't wear that to church. I bet when they go to church, their mohawk is completely flattened down. It's like, but it's one of these things, like you look at what we talked about last week, and like we all struggle with it, we all deal with it. But I grew up going to concerts. When concerts would come by, whether it was Stephen Curtis Chapman, Michael W. Smith, For Him, some of you guys are going, I remember those bands. Some of you are going, I have no idea who those people are. It's okay. But there was one concert in particular, and the reason I love going to these is because I love, as a musician, I love to hear great singers. I love to hear groups that just the vocals lock in together and the harmonies are really tight. I love to watch instruments come together and just everything just fall into place. And honestly, when I went to college, as a music major, it actually kind of turned me off to those things. It became very difficult to listen to anything, church choirs, school choirs, marching bands, anything, because I became so critical of music. It really kind of pained me a little bit. But when I think back on the concerts that I've been to, there are two interactions that I had that just have kind of shaped my perspective on life a little bit. One of them, I was in high school, and we went to see the group For Him. For Him was a group that back in the mid-'90s, late '90s, they became very popular. They originally sang all four guys as a part of a group called Truth. Some of you may remember Truth from back in the day. But they had songs, some of their biggest hits were songs like The Basics of Life, The Measure of a Man. They had songs, they actually released an entire hymns album that has one of my favorite versions of all time of Be Thou My Vision. But I was always enamored with the guys that sang really, really high, because I had like a kind of a deep speaking voice, and I wanted to be able to sing high, and Raquel's laughing at me because she's heard me try to sing these really, really high notes sometimes. But we had gone to see For Him, and after the concert, they had decided they were going to load up and go to one of the nearby family Christian stores. And so they got there, we were in line to see them, and I kept looking at them. I was coming, I was like, I'm going to try to say something that'll make them like talk to me a little bit more than, man, I just love your music kind of thing. You know, I want to do something more than that because I wanted the interaction. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to compliment these guys. I'm going to tell them how fantastic they are. And we go in, and like I'm watching, and the line's getting shorter, and their manager's doing this. He keeps looking at his watch like, we got to go, guys. We got to go. We got to be on the other side of the country by 6 a.m. kind of thing. And we get there, and there's one guy. His name's Andy Chrisman. And Andy is, I've only met him the one time, and I know I'm using his name like I know him personally. It's just what we did in my family. But I walked up to him, and they started walking down the line of people so they could give autographs and that kind of stuff. They were walking through, and I stopped. I shook his hand and said, Andy, I love you guys' music so much. I only have one complaint. He's like, okay, what? I said, it's too high for me to sing. He said, guess what? I said, what? He said, it's too high for me to sing too. And it just made me laugh. I was like, oh. It was going to go one of two ways. He was either going to like just shut me down and be like, dude, who do you think you are? Or he was going to ignore me, or it was going to be something like that. And I was so glad it was that, because about 6 months later, I went to see another group. My youth pastor took me to see him. He was also the music minister of our church, and we sang one of their songs together. This is no reflection on the band, on the group as a whole, but it was the group New Song. Remember, the band New Song, they've been around since the 80s. They've had lots of personnel changes. By the time we had gone to see them, there were two new guys singing with them that were phenomenal singers. Oh my goodness. Like I tried to emulate them. I did it with every singer that I heard that sang super, super high because I wanted to be like them, so I emulated their voice. And after the concert, I went up to them. They had closed out the service with the song, Arise My Love. Like if you've not heard the song Arise My Love, don't worry, I'll post it online later. You can go home and listen to it and cry like a baby. But they sang the song, and I walked up afterwards. They had everything. It was done in a church, so it wasn't like there was these like off the side areas where you could go and meet the band and all. They were just kind of hanging out on the stage. And I walked up and I talked to all the guys that were there, and I saved who I thought was the best for last. And I walked up to him, and I don't know if he was having a bad day. I don't know if he was just, or if he had just kind of reached that point, you know. And I told him, I said, man, you have got an incredible voice. You cannot make this stuff up. We're looking eye to eye because I'm like junior, senior in high school. And he says, and he goes, I know. I just kind of looked at him and went, okay, and walked off. Those interactions had such a profound effect on me. And it literally has affected me for the rest of my life. And I don't know if you'll be able to see it well on the screen. If you can't, you'll see it on your screens at home. But this meme right here, if you can't read it, this is what it says. When people give me compliments, I feel like a vending machine trying to accept a wrinkly dollar, and it's just really frustrating for everyone involved. This is me. Because I don't know how to respond to a compliment because of this. The reality is that accepting praise is such a weird thing. It's uncomfortable because, and especially now anymore in our culture, we're not used to being told or hearing that we did good at something or that we are good at something. I mean, we're really not. And the reality is we all want the encouragement. Everybody, if somebody looks at you and says, I don't need encouragement, I don't need compliments, they're lying to you. It's because they don't know how to do it. And the reason they don't know how to do it is because everything in our world and our culture is so flipped on its head. The reason that Andy's comment hit me so different, looking back on it, is because it wasn't a spotlight moment. It wasn't a, let me bask in my greatness. Let me hear what you have to say and let me just soak it in and feed my greatness. It was a comment that whether he looked at me and said, hey, this kid's obviously like kind of young, and so I don't want to like shut him down or I don't want to whatever. It was the fact that his response to it was done in all humility. Like there was no comment made back about how great he thought he was. There was no comment. He didn't even acknowledge the fact that I said, you guys are amazing. Like your vocals are ridiculously good. But there was nothing about, there was no pushback on it. He just accepted the compliment with grace and humility. You know, the one thing, this right here, that one aspect is something that informs every aspect of our day-to-day realigning with who Jesus is. Every single second of it. Our culture tends to push us the other direction. Our culture tends to push us towards this spotlight mentality, towards the celebrity ideals. The culture pushes us to elevate ourselves. It pushes us to become more than what we are now. It continues to say, climb the ladder, step on whoever you have to get there. That's the whole reason why our world has celebrities. Because somewhere along the way, somebody wanted to be elevated beyond where they are. And there's something about it that we look at it and say, man, I wish I could be like them. And then reality TV became a thing. And it created this culture where anyone and everybody now had the ability to be seen and heard and to be known and to feel important. And then you have YouTube coming around and social media, and it pushes everything into this place where now every single person on the planet feels like they need to be seen and heard and known by everybody on the planet so that they can receive the pat on their back that they want, whether they need it or not, or even really deserve it or not. The fact that that's kind of crept its way into the church is even worse. Jesus actually directly pushed back against this idea of celebrity for the sake of celebrity. Like, he actively pushed back against the ones who actually kind of leaned into this whole thing and started this whole trend. In Matthew chapter 6, he says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, because then you'll have no reward from the one that matters the most, your Father who's in heaven. And in verse 5, he says, when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites, because they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Guess what? They have their reward. They were seen. They were heard. Big deal. They didn't get the reward that matters. And then in verse 6, it says, when you pray, don't heap up empty praises as the Gentiles do, for they think that they'll be heard because of their many words. Then in Matthew chapter 23, he goes even further. It says, then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. I love this. It says, so observe what they tell you to do, but don't do what they do, because they preach, but they don't practice what they preach. They tie up heavy burdens that are hard to bear and lay them on the people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, because they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. The phylacteries is the head dressing that they would wear over top of their hats. The fringes were the tassels on the end of their phylacteries, where they would, each one represented a different law of Moses that they were keeping. It says they love the place of honor at feasts and the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces and being called rabbi by others. And then he's talking to his disciples. He says, the greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. You just heard a practical example of that. Think back to the stories that I told about the two different men that I met. The one who was humble, the one who was full of himself, got pushed down. This whole concept, this whole thing, Jesus calls out this idea of need of having to be seen by people and having to be perceived as something. It's this idea of not being well thought of. Okay? There's nothing wrong with people thinking well of you. The Bible over and over again says that if you follow God's ways, people will think highly of you. They will respect you. They will think well of you. And they will, when you go past the city gates, they'll look at you and they will respect you, and you will find all of those things happening if you are already following God, if you are following what he wants you to do. Okay? What he's talking about here isn't being well respected and well thought of. What he's talking about is making people think that they should think well of you. That's what he's talking about. This idea that you should think well of me because of who I am, that I'm doing all these things in front of you, even though behind the scenes my world is falling apart. But you know what? I'm saying the prayers. I'm reading the things. I'm going to the right services. I'm doing 15 Bible studies on my own. I've invited people to come do Bible studies. I'm hosting people at my house once a week. I'm doing all of these things. I'm taking food to the poor. I'm inviting people in. I'm doing all of these things. Look at me for how godly I am. Jesus says, no, don't do that. That doesn't bring any reward from the Father. You've got your reward when you do that. As people look at you and they are such a man or woman of God. That's not the point. The point comes back in this. See, the Pharisees and Gentiles presented themselves as more than they were, and they eventually began to see themselves as more than they were. In the book of Luke, in chapter 18, Jesus is telling parables, and he comes to another one that says, he also told this parables to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Hang on right there for a second. Who do you think these people were? These were the religious leaders. These were the people that Jesus has already over and over and over told people, Don't listen to them because they're in authority over you, but don't do what they do because they're not practicing what they preach. They're practicing humility and godliness, but everything about them is trying to build themselves up and build up their reputation and their wealth and their everything, and they've put my Father on the back burner. So in Luke chapter 18, it says he also told the parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. And he starts off, he says, 2 men went into the temple to pray. One a Pharisee, the religious leaders. Now this is interesting because he actually says one was a Pharisee, okay? There were other religious groups there, but the Pharisees tended to be the ones who tried to trap him in the law the most. The Sadducees were there, but they didn't believe in a resurrection. They didn't necessarily even believe that there was a kingdom of God that was coming. So it was really no big deal off of their back to hear Jesus talking about the kingdom of God because they were like, whatever. But they were part of the religious leadership of the nation of Israel that was pushing back against everything that Jesus taught because it made them look bad. Now, the other thing that's notable here is he's mentioning the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the experts in who God was, but then the other person he mentions wasn't a sinner, wasn't an adulterer, wasn't even a Samaritan. It was a tax collector. Because tax collectors were no different than how we see our government today. A lot of people in our world today see our government leaders as traitors to the people that they vowed to serve. Tax collectors were seen as traitors to the nation of Israel because they were taking wealth from the nation of Israel to give not just to the temple, not just to Rome, but also to the temple. They were robbing from their people and becoming wealthy. Tax collectors could collect their tax for Caesar, but then they could take however much extra tax they wanted to make themselves wealthy. So he goes from one extreme to the other. He says one person was someone who is a Pharisee. He's an expert in the law. He's the one who is godly. He's this person. And the other one is the worst of the worst of the worst in the eyes of the people. He goes on, he says, the Pharisee standing by himself prayed like this: God, thank you so much that I am not like other men, the extortioners, the unjust, the adulterers, or even this tax collector. Because I fast twice a week and I give tithes of all that I get. This parable destroyed everything that the Pharisees had built up. It destroyed in the eyes of the people that they were better than everyone else. Because they pop up, and the very first thing, I didn't put it up on the screen, but the very next part of that is the tax collector on his face, crying out for God's forgiveness. He understood how low he was. He understood his place in relation to God. The Pharisees always saw themselves as bigger and better, but the Pharisees were missing this one key ingredient that if we're not careful, we miss. Because of the fact we don't. Like you can say all day long, but I get up and I pray and I do my Bible study. That's great. You're learning information. But if you don't take those things that you're learning and you use those to daily realign yourself with the will of the Father and remind yourself, I'm not as big as I think I am. I am not as important as I think I am. Then we miss it. Because this one thing prevents us from doing every single thing that we've talked about up to this point. This one idea. Jesus knew this would be an issue for people, so he chose to speak directly to it. He chose to pinpoint this one thing out. In Matthew chapter 20, verses 25 through 28, it says Jesus called them to himself, okay? This is leading into the events of of the crucifixion and his arrest and all, he pulls people around him. He says, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Okay? You know that they lord this over themselves. And we've talked about this in the past, okay? This idea of when the nation of Rome took over and they had kind of started to insert themselves into the culture of any nation they conquered. It was this Hellenization process where they started leaning in and letting bits and pieces of their thoughts and their ideals bleed in to become part of the culture and to become something else. This is why Jesus doesn't refer in this instance to the Pharisees, because the reason the Pharisees are doing this is because the nation of Rome has been in charge for so long. This is why it got as bad as it did. Whether the Pharisees or not, whether they started off the right way, the high priests and the ones who were the top end of the Sanhedrin, as they got older and the influence of Rome became more and more, and the Romans began to say, listen, you're above them. You wield the power. You are the one, like we don't understand this idea of only having one God. As far as we're concerned, like you're all gods to these people. So force them to worship you. Those thought processes, that mindset creeps in, and if we're not careful, it creeps in today, because we, even in church world, we have Christian celebrities. And if we hold them up too high, they will fall and they will break us and they will let us down, and we will question everything that we know unless we grab a hold of this. He says, you know the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. Jesus says, you should not, no. If you're going to follow me, you're not going to strive to be the authority. You're not going to strive to be the one who people are coming to as an act of worship. You're not going to strive to be the one that people look at the way that you look at the Pharisees. That's not what you're going to be. He said, it will not be so among you, but whoever, I love this, whoever would be great. The one in the eyes of the Father who will be seen as being great. The one who will receive the reward from my Father. The one who my Father will elevate. The one who my Father will build up among you must be your servant. The one the Father is going to build up from among you is going to be the one who is going to serve you. Whoever would be first among you must be your slave. It's a strange word to use there. It doesn't mean what you think it means. It said, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Paul would say it this way. Even the Son of Man did not consider equality with God something to be attained or striven for, but instead he humbled himself, even to the point of death, even death on a cross. See, we take this. This is this same story, this same instance is recorded not just in Matthew, but it's also recorded in Mark and Luke. And Jesus turns this idea of greatness on its head and he says, listen, greatness is not something that's found in being better than someone. It's not found in being the best singer, the best teacher, the smartest person in the room. It's not found in being the one with the most money. It's not the one with the most toys. It's not the one with the biggest church, the biggest congregation. It's not the one that has the church with the most ministry opportunities. It's all about humility. It's all about looking at who you are and understanding where you exist in relationship to the Father. It's all about understanding that you are not the end-all, be-all. It's all about understanding. And Jesus was God's son, okay? This is exactly, he's talking about, even though the Son of Man did not come to be served, but instead to serve and to ransom his life for many. Jesus was God's son, deity incarnate. He had access to all of the power of God. It would have been easy for him to leverage that and say, listen, I'm God. You want a healing? You get a healing. You need a miracle? You get a miracle. He could have very easily become the Oprah Winfrey of the time. You get a miracle, you get a miracle, you get. It would have been easy. The Pharisees even kept asking him, okay, fine. If you are who you say you are, then give us a sign. And Jesus, why? You wouldn't believe it anyway. So he humbled himself. He completely rewrote the paradigm on what it looked like to be great. He rewrote the paradigm. He changed the path to celebrity and being known. Jesus didn't become a celebrity. Yes, there were some that followed him because of the signs that he did, the wonders that he did, the miracles that he performed. But every single person that you heard, they would all say, there's something different about him. He doesn't teach the way that the leaders teach. He's not, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something different, and it was the humility. He humbled himself every step of the way. It was an upside down view that pointed out like the true desires of people. Judas expected a military leader who was going to ride in on a white stallion to empty the nation of the Romans, to kick them out, to raise up an army. And instead, he rode into the city on a donkey. The religious leaders, I don't know what they were expecting. They pushed back over every single thing that he accomplished, and they saw that lined up with prophecy. But they pushed back because he wasn't what they expected. Jesus rewrote everything, showing what our true desires was. The idea of love others as I have loved you would become the calling card of humility. I think about it. You can't love people the way Jesus does if you're full of yourself. It has to start with humility. Jesus said, greater love has no man than this, that he would lay his life down for a friend. You can't be willing to lay down your life for someone if you're full of yourself. It just doesn't work. The whole idea of this entire series is about becoming who we were called to be. Guys, when we become who we're called to be, we become servants, not kings and queens. Let that sink in for a moment. When we become who we're actually called to be, we become servants, not kings and queens. Will God place us in authority over things? Absolutely. He's placed me in authority here. But I'm not a king or a queen. I just want to serve God. I want to be faithful to what he's called us to. I want to help rewrite what it looks like to be a church. I want to help rewrite what it looks like to be a Christian in today's culture. I want to help be a part of the solution that drives us back to what Jesus called us to be, instead of trying to be what the world wants us to be. Let me ask you a very serious question, because you have to ask yourself this question. How many times I'm going to go ahead and tell you mine is way higher than I would like for it to be. How many times in your life have you been the Pharisee that said, thank God I'm not like them? Now let me ask you the flip side of that. And again, I'm going to say, My answer is probably way more than I would like for it to be. How many times have you been the one it was said about? Guys, humility requires that daily realigning. True godly humility requires you being so connected to Jesus that you can't see anything else. Because the minute you take your eyes off of him and you disconnect yourself from the vine, remember he said, I'm the vine, you are the branches, and if you remain in me, then you will bear good fruit. Remember, you can't bear fruit on your own. Otherwise, it's your fruit, not the fruit of the Spirit. If we disconnect ourselves from that for too long, it forces us to begin to move up that ladder. True humility requires that day-by-day realigning. And when we become truly humble, then we become more like Jesus. Jesus had every reason to lean people into the celebrity of who he was. And instead, he chose to hide it until the last moment. Guys, we're sinners. Every single one of us. We're sinners. But if you are a Christ follower, you are saved by grace. If you've not placed your faith in that salvation, then you're still a sinner. Even if you are a follower of Jesus, you are still a sinner. Okay, let me go ahead and say that. You are not perfect. You still sin every single day. I still sin every single day. But I know that there is a God who loves me and sent his son for me and for you. Not to condemn us for our sins, but to free us from our sins, to save us, to forgive us, and to pull us back into his family, to give us the right to be called sons and daughters of God, and has invited us to follow him so that we can become more like him, so that other people will see him in us, and they will begin to follow him because of the example that we set in front of them. People will follow you. If you're charismatic enough and you're knowledgeable enough, they will follow you. But are they following you because they see Jesus in you? That's the real question. Guys, we didn't deserve what he gave us. We didn't even deserve to be received into the family, but he calls us by name. We don't deserve to be included in the equation, yet he added us to his plan. We deserve to be seen as the least of these, as unworthy, without value. But instead, he sees us as priceless. We are saved by grace through faith alone and not by works, or else we'd be able to boast about it. There's absolutely nothing that we can do as a Christian apart from God. We can talk a good talk, but our walk will be pitiful in comparison to the example set by Jesus. At some point, if we want to become who we're called to be, we have to humble ourselves and understand that apart from him, I can do nothing. As a man, I can't adequately set the thermostat in my house. apart from him. I can't exhibit the things that people need in order to be able to make it through daily life unless I day by day connect to him. I can't love other people the way that he loved me unless I am daily connected to him. And there's absolutely no way on the face of this earth that I can follow where he leads unless I day by day deny myself, take up my cross, and follow him until I put feet to where he's leading me. Then I'm not really a Jesus follower. We've got to reach a point in our life where we say, you know what? Jesus, I love you. Not only do I love you, but like I just want to be who you're calling me to be. And for a lot of us, we realistically are probably having to start at the place, I've said this before, where like, God, I want to want that, but I'm not there yet. At least be humble enough to admit that you're not quite ready for it. At some point, we have to look at Jesus and reach that point where we say, you know what, God, Jesus, you are worthy of everything that I have. Every song that I sing, every gift that I bring to the table, every relationship that I have, every breath that I breathe, you're worthy of all of it. Since you're worthy of it, I give it to you so that you can build the foundation that I need in my life to be who you've called me to be. My question for you this morning is this: what are you building your life on? Are you building it on your reputation, or are you building it on Jesus' reputation? As a Jesus follower, there can only be one right answer. Otherwise, you need to re-examine calling yourself a Jesus follower. And I've said this before, if that strikes you wrong, the door's right there. Because I'm not going to mince words with you. I'm not going to call you a Jesus follower if you're not following him. I won't do it because he won't do it. The only way to be a Jesus follower is to build your life on a foundation of him on a daily basis, laying it brick by brick. Some of you in this room, that's a whole new concept to you. You're like, I still haven't figured out what I think about this Jesus, but this is the first time I've ever heard somebody put it this way, and I think maybe I like that. Because it's not just so much a one and done thing, it's a process, it's something that I have to be doing. My question to you is, will you do something about it? Will you actually put feet? If you feel Jesus calling you to the foot of the cross, saying, lay it in my hands, will you do it? Will you actually humble yourself enough to go to the foot of the cross and say, Jesus, I need you because I can't do this on my own? If that's you, I would love to talk to you. I would love to answer any questions you have. I would love to pray with you. I would love to walk with you through that journey of finding who Jesus is. So come see me. If you're in this room and you profess to be a Jesus follower, you profess to be a Christian, real talk time, okay? Real talk. Get off your high horse. Humble yourself and put yourself in the right spot in relation to God. I'm not going to pastor a church of Pharisees. If that's what you want, you can fire me today. Because I love you too much to let you sit in the place of God. If you need to get right with God, if you need to get on your face and ask him for forgiveness, the altar is open. If you look at it and you go, I don't know that I want people to know I've been in that place. Pray where you are. God can hear you. He can see you. But I will say there's something about a public forgiveness, because it means you had to actually show humility. Father, thank you. Thank you that you loved us too much to leave us where we were. Thank you for asking us to be a part of what you're doing, just inviting us into the story that you've been writing since the beginning of time. God, whatever chains you need to break, whoever you need to humble, I pray that you do it. Father, I pray that you would bring us to a place where every single one of us in this room that professes to follow you would genuinely seek to be like you day by day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.